Welcome to my final update on this series of wintry events these last 2 weeks. The thaw is on and we're going back to seasonable weather. I'm meteorologist Tanis Leach. As always, I will start with the National Weather Service's watches and warnings. And as you can see, there's nothing for the lowlands or the coast range now. That's a pretty good sign we're going back to more our normal conditions. There is a winter storm warning up for the Cascades as 2 feet or more of snow is expected in the next 2 days, though the Hood River Valley is also under a winter weather advisory. Now, I do want to touch on the final storm notes now that we have more data for the storm. First off, in terms of records, it didn't break any daily records. It did tie, I think, on Wednesday, the low temperature record of 24 degrees. In all fairness, that was a pretty weak record. So, first off, this is the fifth winter in a row where we have seen at least 2 days of snow cover at PDX. I specifically chose this because PDX has been flipping between about 1 and 2 days for its median snow cover over the last 30 years or so. So that's essentially the median or better. I believe this flips it to 2 days or next year. I don't remember which off the top of my head. I will say that this breaks the previous record of 4 years in a row from the winter of 1948 to 49 to 1952 to 53. It's also the 10th winter in a row where PDX got measurable snowfall, which continues that record long streak. We broke that record last year. Also, the previous record was right in this period ending in the winter of 1952 to 53 and starting in the winter of 1946 to 47, I believe. Um, these records are pretty impressive because I remember in meteorological communities, it wasn't that long ago where a lot of us thought that pretty much every single record from the early 1950s seemed to be untouchable when it comes to snowfall duration, snow streaks, anything like that. Well, we just broke two of them in the last 2 years. So maybe they're not as untouchable as we thought. Also, that this was a Willamette Valley wide storm. Anywhere from 2.5 to 4 inches was widespread. And this was one of the more consistent snowfalls that I have seen pretty much from Salem northwards. And it was pretty balanced also throughout the Portland metro area, as you'll see on my snow totals here. So, these cities that I have here are the same cities that I have for my population weighted averages I've done in the past, with the exception of Stella, which I am using in lieu of Kelso because that is where the report from the National Weather Service's public information statement is. The rest of these are a mix of the National Weather Service's public information statements and conditions reports that I have gotten from the PDX Weather Analysis Facebook group, with the exception of Sherwood, which I measured myself, downtown Portland, the Portland National Weather Service office, and Eugene, which are all the official observing sites. So, pretty much between about 3 and 3 2/3 inches in the Portland metro proper, with the biggest winner going to La Center in terms of the reported totals, though I have heard isolated amounts up to about 5 inches in some areas. Down deeper in the valley, once you go past Salem, snow totals taper off to about an inch to 2 inches. McMinnville, I have used in the past for the population weighted average. However, I've not gotten my data back from McMinnville, nor have I seen any reports yet in McMinnville. So that is going to have to wait for the winter weather recap that I post generally around the first few days of April. And then I also want to touch on this February quote unquote hot streak of snowfall we have been experiencing. So that has been occurring here in the Willamette Valley since February of 2014. So just to refresh your memory, February 2014, there was an Arctic blasted valley-wide snowfall from February 4th through 8th, generally 6 to 12 inches, though I believe the Albany area got to their highest snow depth since January of 1969, which was a massive snowstorm for the southern Willamette Valley. February 2018, BC slider systems caused valley snow anywhere from 0 to 7 inches. Poor Salem. February 2019, early month East Metro snowstorm. Late month Eugene had a major snowstorm. It was also the third coldest February on record at PDX. So we never really got out of the, oh, there's always seemingly a chance for snow on the horizon that month. That period of time also set the record for the longest period of time spent below average in a row at, I believe, 36 high temperatures below average. February of 2021, Arctic blast with 10 inches of snowfall in Portland to an inch and a half of ice when you went further down towards Salem. Eugene just experienced plain old rain with that one. February 2023, Portland's second snowiest day on record with almost 11 inches of snow. Metro-wide about 1 to 15 inches with about 6 to 12 inches being widespread. Poor Oregon City. I do have a recap video on that specific snowstorm, which I'll put in the end cards rather than my usual predictions only video for my winter weather forecasts. In February 2025, again, what we just went through. I will also note that February 2021, 2023, and 2025 have had events on Valentine's Day. And so Valentine's Day in particular have been on an extra hot streak. I know most of you probably don't remember what happened on Valentine's Day 2023. It's because it was pretty isolated in terms of the snowfall accumulations. I believe Corvallis was the only e- big city that had any accumulations that day, and the rest of us just saw conversational snow that originally looked like it was going to accumulate. I have it internally known as the Valentine's Day fake out. Right, on to our 7-day forecast for the South Valley. Normalcy. Highs in the 50s for the next 5 days, with off and on rain showers with the wettest days being today and Wednesday, with dry weather starting to occur Thursday through next Saturdays, with highs getting into the low 60s going into next weekend, and low temperatures hovering right about 39 degrees to the mid 40s. For the Portland metro area, also normalcy. In general, same conditions as our friends in the South Valley, with high temperatures about a notch or two cooler, however, for the dry period early next weekend. So I will be going over my verification next, as I always do, for the final update of any significant event we've experienced. So with these verifications, I do it one for you all just to make sure you all keep me honest, but then on the other hand, I do it for myself so I know what areas that I can improve on, especially because in terms of snowfall forecasts here, no forecast ends up being completely perfect. There always seems to be at least one wrinkle or two in them. So let's go over the last 2 weeks. So first off, the appetizers, as I referred to them before. So on the first few events, this was on February 1st through the 4th, I was generally correct on being very spotty showers, with accumulations being only in heavier cells. My forecast for each one of those days was a trace to an inch, and since I expected pretty much most areas to be a trace at best, I didn't even put snowfall maps out for all those videos because there were no heavy cells when temperatures are right, so nothing ended up accumulating. So that is a future note for me in the future that if I expect nothing to accumulate, instead of saying some won't see the accumulations, probably say most won't see accumulations. First of our better events, quote unquote, is our February 5th event. Now, one thing I missed on this was that the track path ended up being more like the classic windstorm path where you have a low pressure system coming up from the southwest and moving southwest to northeast. I have an explanation on that on the video I posted on the 6th of February on what went wrong with that. The domino effect with the track being wrong meant that it led to more southerly winds than I anticipated, and also that it was warmer than anticipated as a result. So instead of my trace to 2 inch forecast, with best estimate being about a quarter to and a half of an inch, ended up just being conversational snow. So, in all fairness, my best estimate for PDX, however, was a trace, as I expected actually less snow there due to the urban heat island effect than the surrounding areas. And then deeper in the Willamette Valley, I didn't expect much anyways. One thing that also went wrong in terms of the track is that personally, I think that the associated atmospheric river that gave Medford 8 inches of snowfall the couple days prior ended up pushing that weak system to the north. Also, forecast models just have an, in general, tough time resolving BC sliders and what they're going to do, especially because this took a rare path of deciding to do a loop-de-loo in the Northeast Pacific. That didn't help matters either. On the event the following Saturday, on the 8th, ended up being no accumulations. I did mention, despite using pretty much the same map, that accumulation patterns would be very similar to that of the February 5th event, with most locations only seeing conversational snow and only isolated spots of accumulations, though a quick inch or two could not have been ruled out there. I don't think any spot in the valley got accumulations below 500 feet that day. Right, on to our main course here. So, first off, the snow forecast was really good. I forecasted about 2 to 5 inches for Washington County and Clark County north of SR 500, and then 1 to 4 inches from about Salem northward. That ended up both verifying because of the widespread about 2.5 to 4 inches from Salem north. Now, the day of, it looked like the South Valley was overperforming, and that ended up happening. So Eugene about 1 to 2 inches metro wide overperformed, especially east of the Willamette River as it was flowing north south and the Delta Highway. So that also made the warm tongue not really a problem on the east side of the valley for initial snowfall, about 1 to 3 inches based on your location. So that was the main wrinkle in the forecast there. Now, I did put out a text update the day of, so that would be Thursday, that pretty much every area might as well be considered part of the 2 to 5 inch forecast. That still was valid. That still ended up verifying because, again, most locations received 2.5 to 4 inches. Freezing rain forecast is in general fine, trended to be on the low end with only a 10 to 2 tenths of an inch. It's really good news for the fact that we didn't get a lot of power outages this time around. And I think it's because when you have ice accumulations less than about a quarter of an inch, tends to not do much damage to structures or power lines, though it can do a lot of damage to your traction. Temperature forecast for those days ended up being fine, though I did find it kind of funny that the temperature timeline ended up being a hybrid of the day before your video that I posted, where I predicted a high temperature of 33 degrees early on in the day and then cooling off as the day went on, and the day of video where I predicted the same high temperature but during the afternoon break. What ended up happening is we had a early high temperature of 32 degrees around 8 or 9 a.m. as the snow was starting. Temperatures fell to about 27 degrees around 1 p.m., and then they warmed up to 35 degrees officially at the airport, though more widespread in the Multnomah County region was about 33 degrees. Also, not specifically with my forecast, it's more of to compare myself to other meteorologists out there, is that this was the closest consensus forecast I have ever seen. Pretty much everyone forecasted 1 to 4 inches and 2 to 5 inches, one of those two for this event. Normally, at least one of us is a outlier in forecasting a little bit more or a little bit less. So happy to see that there was a lot of agreement for this. One exception, though, this time was the National Weather Service. They forecasted 0 to 1 inches of snowfall. They were using the national blend of models, which have been very stingy on our snow events with the classic setup, and this ended up being a modified classic setup. Also, one thing I will note with the National Weather Service is I was a little bit surprised they kept an ice storm warning up for Salem when it became obvious that there was going to be at least an inch or two that's going to fall on the ground rather than converting it over to a winter storm warning. That made communicating the National Weather Service's watches and warnings a little bit difficult, especially since it was a disagreement with my forecast. Last time I had really one of those was the February 2023 snowstorm where I ended up being the outlier and ended up being mainly correct. Though, as with every snow forecast, there was a notable things I did get wrong on that, especially southeast side of the valley. Correct also on doing a frozen lasagna from snow to freezing rain to snow. Now, onto miscellaneous stuff, and this is more of a pattern at large. First off, I on the very first video I came out, I decided to take a risk and do a long range forecast, meaning something that wasn't as long as my winter weather outlooks are normally, but longer than a 7-day forecast was allowed because I was unusually confident that an Arctic blast would occur later in the month, though could not rule out just it sliding east of the Rockies. An Arctic blast ended up happening for those east of the Cascades. Klamath Falls broke their February all-time coldest temperature. Burns got their second coldest February lowest temperature. Ended up not being a true Arctic blast west of the Cascades, and we just got the backdoor version of that. I did predict that the third week of February instead happened the second week of February because the polar vortex normally has like a 7 to 10 day lag time after it takes a hit for that Arctic blast to come down southward. And I'm referring to the stratospheric polar vortex, not the tropospheric polar vortex. And it ended up occurring right when the polar vortex got hit. The polar vortex has since recovered, and now it's back to being as stubborn as it's been this winter. In fact, it's been pretty historically stubborn at that. Most days at PDX overperformed in temperatures, in Corvallis underperformed, generally not more than about 3 degrees or so. Another thing I want to note is that this is more for just the channel in general. This is the most amount of videos I have made in terms of a significant weather event. Earlier on the channel, it tended to be about 3 to 6 videos per event because none of them were very significant in duration, meaning not over a week. The January 2024 Arctic Blast slash Ice Storm was the first that I went over 7 videos for that. And then this made that look like it was just an average snowstorm with 14 videos instead. And I will note that this is not the only thing I do. I do have a day job as well and that means whenever I make these videos, I'm generally putting in 12-hour days, 8 at my actual job, and then generally about 4 hours outside of it to make these videos. I normally have a head start though by the time I get home. And then last thing for my verification, and these are my quick lessons learned, not just for me, but for anyone. Here, first off, time since the Arctic front passing through can be important for determining precipitation type. So that's another thing that didn't really go according to plan is I did not anticipate the Arctic front producing any precipitation, and it did produce some flurries in the metro area. So, in January 2024, the Arctic front only rolled through about 12 hours before the onset of precipitation. That made it very easy for a warm tongue to develop, and as a result, ended up being pretty much all sleet south of the Columbia River. In February 2025, we had 64 hours between the onset precipitation and that Arctic front rolling in. So that meant the Arctic air had a better chance of getting established, even though the Arctic air this time was considerably weaker that was able to get west of the Cascades than the Arctic air in January of 2024. Also, the GFS model is occasionally right, as it in general got the pattern correct throughout this, whole event. However, the European model did show the snowstorm 2 weeks in advance and picked up on that specific snowstorm before the GFS. The GFS did do better for the upper level patterns. When saying a trace to an inch for isolated showers not likely to accumulate, probably will end up meaning nothing. This is more of a communication issue I'm going to fix in the future. So there was a few people confused about that, so that's just lesson for myself in the future. Then also models underdo south wind in a classic windstorm path from a weak system, especially something like a BC slider when it tends to underdo that anyways. And then also, this is more funny than anything, but also a facepalm moment for me. So about a month ago, I posted something on the Portland subreddit, a meteorological analysis, and essentially what I did is I invited people to DM me if they wanted my channel link because I didn't want to post it on Reddit because I'm not using my real name on there. Well, I made the mistake of copy pasting every single person pretty much the exact same message with maybe a few tidbits being different as needed. That caused me to get suspended from Reddit for 3 days. Don't know why they waited a month to suspend me though, because my suspension actually just expired about 4 hours ago at the time of making this video. So yeah, that was not fun, but funny at the same time. So, so the last thing I want to mention for these series of videos is thank you. Thank you for everyone who viewed my videos during these 2 weeks and change, and especially for all the new viewers who found me through either the Portland subreddit or however you found me through. I hope you all learned something from these videos, especially the background dynamics behind why I'm forecasting everything that I am even though I didn't use any model images specifically. If you want me to use more model images in these videos, let me know and I'd be happy to include them in the future, at least finding a way to include them. And then to give you all an update on what is going to come up on the channel next, I'm not going to be doing a PNW Weather 101 episode in February. We're already more than halfway through the month anyways. The next PNW Weather 101 episode will come out in early March, and fresh off the heels of this snowstorm, it will be on cold air damming and how that increases likelihood of snow in certain areas of the Willamette Valley and decreases it in others. So be on the lookout for that probably right around March 3rd, maybe a little later if I can't get it done on time. And then my winter weather recap video will come out in early April as well, where I'll go over my winter weather forecast to see how well it did. Right now, looks like there's going to be a lot of half points on there. Um, so I hope you all enjoyed these videos as much as I've enjoyed making these videos, forecasting the weather, and enjoying the weather. It is what I got my degree in after all. Must like it at least a little bit if I was crazy enough to get a degree in it. And hopefully you're enjoying the more normal weather now. So, till I see you again and talk to you again, stay safe out there and take care.